Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines and the stories that make our community tick. Well, 3 letters make our community tick. You hear it all the time, D-O-T. But in the last 2 years, that has stopped being a pejorative and something that's actually working with New Haven to try to make our streets safer and alternative to driving places so we can get to work and get to everywhere else we need to go. We have someone in who can tell us all about that today. We have the State Department of Transportation Commissioner, Joseph Giulietti. He's been in the gig since January 2019, and he's here to fill us in all the exciting stuff happening and all the tough decisions he's facing. Joe Giulietti, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me, Paul.
And I'm going to ask you to get so close to that mic.
Okay.
You're almost touching it. It's going to have. So how are things going at DOT? I know you're busy as heck. You got a lot of money flowing in. You got a lot of big projects underway.
Oh, you could actually do the interview then. Okay? How are things going? To be very candid with you, there's been an awful lot of adaptation going through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
The DOT never lost ground. I don't know if you're aware of it, but some DOTs shut down during the pandemic and laid people off, and some of them even shut down their rest areas. But our governor made a decision that here at our DOT, we were going to keep working. Our contractors were going to keep working. We've never lost a day.
Really, never lost a day, like working out on road crews and stuff?
No. I mean, when I say never lost a day, I mean in terms of productivity. Yes, we've had a road crew that would show up in the beginning with the pandemic and have to put all of them off for 10 days. And then, eventually we worked it out that we would have half of them in, and then the other half would come in the next week, and we use the interim week for training and other purposes, so we could never lose an entire garage again while we're going through it. So the other problem, it is a problem. One of the things that's happened with the change in the pension system, a lot of the employees have to take their pension or their retirement before July.
And this is not a DOT issue. This is a state of Connecticut issue.
Yes. But for the DOT...
Well, those are an opportunity as well as a problem, right?
Well, it is, but let me explain to you why it's a problem, because you are right. Normally, with normal attrition, that is an opportunity. But we're talking about, at my agency alone, somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40% of the people will have to go between the beginning of the year and July. So I'm already signing a lot of retirement letters every single day. And I don't have to tell you, you can look at the signs right outside your office and on 91, what, people are looking for CDL licenses. They're offering all types of
Tell people what
bonuses.
CDL is.
It's the license that you need in order to be able to drive trucks or buses in the state.
Actually, I rode a bus this morning, and I was looking at that. I was wondering what CDL was. I got from context. I'm not that stupid. I knew it meant you wanted bus drivers.
No, I knew you knew. You were
CDL.
looking to see whether or not I was that stupid.
No. I said CDL. I figured they want driver, but I'm probably too old. Because I was looking, it was 28 something an hour, which really wasn't bad for starting.
Yeah, well, and I believe the actual it's commercial driver's license.
Right.
But,
Okay.
But anyways, from the standpoint of very, very difficult to get people with CDLs. So we have to look at how are we going to be able to manage that going forward. One of the issues that...
I wasn't thinking of that when you said it.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the people who manage projects who have a lot of institutional knowledge. You want to make sure that gets carried through so they know how to hire contractors, do the bidding, make sure you're following up projects. But you need people to drive the bus, and I didn't even think that you're also talking about bus drivers.
Bus drivers.
Crane operators. Right?
Crane operators. Okay, yes. All of those people, the snowplow operators, okay, all of those are CDL licenses. Turn around and add to that the other ones that you're talking about. The knowledge base that we're losing, that people with 30 and 40 years worth of service are walking out the door right now, and they have been. They were the ones that applied for federal funds. They're the ones that know how to manage a project, know how to inspect a project. Our bridge inspectors, our highway operators, our bridge builders, our paving people, the people that do the testing of the paving to make sure that it's met all the requirements. All of that is the type of knowledge that we have to go and hire.
So I imagine that you, as someone who runs an agency, and how many employees is it?
Over 3,000.
So one thing that I'm just guessing that when you go to bed that might make you nervous when you're trying not to think about work is not having someone in place to get that document in to get the federal grant on which $20 million depends, or making sure a crew shows up. In other words, that there are all these people sort of in the middle of the line who have to keep the trains running, quote unquote.
Well, I mean, even on the train side, but, to be candid with you, one of the things that I do get to I'll say brag about is that never has the DOT let the public down. Okay, they've always been very, very fiscally conservative. Okay, looking to protect the public's money. So even as they're going out the door, everybody's doing everything they can to make sure that they've protected those issues.
So are we looking at about 1,000 people leaving?
Right now, my number is between 600 and 800 that I've got to hire right now. That's with all the hiring that we've already done, but trying to get through getting all the people that I need to get in there.
From bus drivers up to project managers.
You got it. Everything. All the way through. Okay, project managers.
So Joseph Giulietti wants to give you a job.
You got it.
But you got to go get that license.
Well, we may be able to work that part out too. What
Tell
I
me
need
about
right
that.
now. Well, I was starting to say we learned a lesson from Maine. Maine actually started paying for the CDL licenses for people they brought in. The unfortunate part was 3 days after they got their license, they all left to go take higher paying jobs.
Oh, man, that's like when we train the cops in New Haven and the suburbs pick them up for more money and less work. Yeah.
So that's why, I had a son that ended up working for NASA on the International Space Station. And what they did with him when he graduated UConn was for every year you were there, they would pay off 20% of your college loans.
So that those first 5 years
you lock
feel
them in for 5 years and then they stay. So we're looking at different ways to approach what we can invest in and whether or not, we can turn around and whatever it costs us, you owe that to the state. And for every year you're there, we'll
so in
reduce
other words, if you're going to
25%.
pay for the CDL license, you got to work it for a while. You're going to owe it back.
Exactly. That's what we're looking for, because the truth is, and I don't know what the next generation is going to be, but people that came to the DOT made a career out of it. And that's what we want to continue, is to have the type of dedication we currently have. So when you said, do I lose sleep at night? Not over the personnel that I have. I've got people that are extremely dedicated, okay? The sad part is, even today, I'm walking around shaking hands with a number of people that, they have to leave in order to protect the pension system, not that they wanted to go and leave.
And if it weren't such a big number at once, it'd be more of an opportunity just to rethink how you do things. But if it's as many people at once, you got to make sure
Well, I mean,
jobs are
aren't we
getting
all
done.
rethinking how we did things through this
Yeah,
pandemic?
right.
Okay. I had 12 people telecommuting before the pandemic started. I have 1,200 telecommuting right now. So, so it gives you an idea of.
And how many is it going to be once we're through the next 20 variants and we feel everything's safe?
It's going to be interesting because, both, I've heard the side that a lot of businesses are saying, oh, we don't need to lease as much space. Teleworking is working. And then you're seeing in the recent weeks more and more of the businesses that are trying to get everybody to come on back in, because you do lose an awful lot when you don't have that.
I'm seeing that
personal
with the
exchange.
news. Like, we're back in days when we were here. We get more done, more effective by sharing ideas, even if you're not being a bean counter about productivity per minute. But there are some permanent advantage for some people some days. Like today, our station manager's remote, but he's doing everything. But when he's here, it works a little differently. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the fact, like even right now, the interchange between you and I, okay, I enjoyed the last time we met down there by Union Station. You get a lot more. You're able to go and ask me some things to the side. It generates some other conversations. And the information exchange that goes on when you're with your peers in a building.
I'm with you like 9,000%, Joe, about in-person connections. What is that going to mean? Does that mean you went from 12 to 1,200? What's it going to end up at?
I don't know now. Being candid, how many are, I still have to wait to see, because I don't have let's say, people have the right to determine when they want to go out, but I've got a good idea how many people are going to be going out. And the other end of it is that, what we had the Band-Aid put in place in order to get people to be able to remotely work now has to be institutionalized to, the equipment that's there, the access into the computers that are there. And you got to remember, when this started, I had been told there was no way you could handle the bandwidth for that many people to be able to telecommute. We found out you can handle the bandwidth.
How did you do it? What did it take?
Huh?
What did it take?
Weeks. Not even months or anything else.
Right.
Weeks, and everything was
And
going.
for bus drivers, I mean, it's a good
Now
job.
they can't telecommute.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
I love the bus drivers. So I've
Yeah.
been taking buses for a long time. I think the buses are clean. They're wonderful buses. You've had to do a lot of work making the schedules change because people's workflow change. But I always have a good experience on the bus, including today. They're always clean. The bus drivers are terrific. I feel bad sometimes for them because it's tough for them to get the bathroom breaks.
That part is true, and the other part was we did everything we could to protect them as well. We were trying to get them all the protective gear that was possible. And if you
I
remember,
don't think we had those stories. Like, I remember Detroit during the beginning of the outbreak when the drivers were dying. It was really sad. But
Yeah.
they do a pretty good job on the bus in terms of wearing the mask. Like, I didn't take the bus for a while at the beginning of the COVID, but then I felt pretty good with how even today, when most people, like I'm not wearing a mask here on the bus, they're pretty serious
Well,
about it.
transportation, you still have to. They've extended to April, and
And
what
it
we
makes
did,
sense.
Yeah, we closed off when the pandemic began. We closed off that front door entrance. Everybody got on the back
I remember,
door,
yeah.
and we made it an honor system because, we did not want to make the financial end of paying the fare at the risk of exposing bus drivers. When, we had a lot of cases. We lost 130 people to the Transit Authority down in New York when the pandemic started, working on.
How many we lose in Connecticut?
It was, I don't want to throw a number out there.
And
that
you
I
also
can't
never
back
know
up.
where they caught it. I remember there was a couple in one was working in the bus yard, one was driving a bus in Hamden. Jamal Molly Gether says, great job, Service Lane, for keeping the bus clean. Thanks for listening in, Jamal, and for Kenzie. And what you're listening to is Dateline New Haven at WNHH-FM New Haven's home for community radio. We have State Department of Transportation Commissioner Joseph Giulietti, who has kind of changed the relationship with the city of New Haven. We were fighting with DOT for a lot of years. Part of it was philosophical, and it was an honest philosophical difference about, we felt the prioritizing of cars over bikes and pedestrians, and that's kind of worked out. And also, the commissioner has a personal relationship with New Haven, having grown up here, and kind of, so it was a good relationship from the start. But before we get to that, Commissioner Giulietti, tell me about this raining of money. I mean, the skies opened up for the first time in yours and my adult life, I think. Tell me if this is accurate. In our adult lives, government has always legitimately say, we don't have enough money to do what we want to do. We have to make tough choices about not doing something that we should do because we need money for something else. For a variety of reasons, the sky has opened up and it's raining money. There's federal pandemic relief dollars. The states have surpluses now. And, of course, we just passed the biggest ever infrastructure bill in the history of the country. Now, you're playing not just a state role in that, but a national role. I don't remember them all, but you gave me all your titles before about these national organizations you run for freight and highway travel. Tell me what this infrastructure bill is going to mean for us.
Well, for us, it honestly is a game changer. It first started off with when we found out that of the federal money that we were getting, we were going to have an increase of over 38% just in the federal appropriations that come in. So that
was that part of the infrastructure bill? Or?
Yes. Okay. And then on top of it all, we found out that, there's going to be $1 billion of competitive grants that you can go for. The towns can actually go for their own projects aside from the DOT. I will tell you that I've been down there with our congressional delegation all the way through this.
When you say $1 billion, is that for the state? The state's going to have $1 billion of competitive grants.
There's going to be $100 billion nationally.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
And we get 1/100th of that. Okay.
Well, we can't even say that. No, because the truth of the matter is it depends on who's able to get in there with plans that get approved for the.
So just so I understand it, in addition to this 38% boost and how many transportation dollars we get from the federal government, there's this other $1 billion that states and towns can apply for as well as the state. And that's what you're talking about, the Amtrak press conference that we're also going to be able to go for.
Well, no,
projects.
that one's even additional funds beyond what I was already talking to you about. What they ended up doing is, there's this Northeast Corridor Commission.
Right.
And I'm on that as well. Okay. And you happened to be there when Stephen Gardner was there. Okay. And
the new head of Amtrak.
Yep. He's both the chairman and the president of Amtrak. And if you don't know it already, Connecticut is their slowest pinch point in their entire system. So here we are in one of the densest corridors in the United States. And not only is our highway one of the densest areas, our rail system is the densest area, and everything slows down as they go through Connecticut. So we're looking at the fact that they've given more money to us that's going to allow us to go and increase speeds on the New Haven line. We're looking at everything from whether or not we can electrify the Hartford line, the Waterbury, and the Danbury line. Things that were inconceivable years ago are now on the table. And you can imagine how many calls, even right now, that you're going to get when people start hearing that those are possibilities. We're looking at whether or not we can take our M8s, which are our electric
What is it,
cars.
M8? Oh,
The red striped cars that are going down between New Haven and New York, that were the first ones that had the outlets at every one of the seats, and they have regenerative braking that we actually recapture some of the electricity that's used every time they put on the brakes, and a fantastic operation that's going on there. Well, those M8s right now, we're going to be able to. We have proven that we can operate them on the shoreline. That's going to be a game changer.
That's true, because you have those old cars going on the shoreline.
Well, you have the old cars that are going on, and they're going on there in a diesel type operation, okay, or a pull operation. But if we can turn around and get the M8s, we also have been working with the MTA that our M8s will be able to go into Penn Station. Working that out took, quite a change, and I won't go into the whole electrical issue on it. But the M8s will be able to go into Penn Station. They'll be able to go into Grand Central. And there's now discussions. We've actually, the former commissioner from Massachusetts wanted to borrow a set of our M8s so they could see whether or not they could make it comply with the state of Massachusetts. So, that you understand that there's a lot more opportunity right now in terms of what can be done out there. So all this is on the table. We have, as I said before, we're very, very fortunate that we've got a very engaged legislature and a very engaged congressional delegation.
So specifically, how are people's lives going to change because of all this money?
Well, how they're definitely going to change is, let's start with New Haven, okay? What you're going to see here at New Haven is we are working with them on all the plans for New Haven, which include that we start setting up rapid transit buses, that we're now going to look at, instead of just putting bus systems or putting up housing and then trying to find a way to go and connect the bus system to it, we're tying it all in so that everything is supposed to have a connector going through it. One of the things I learned in the pandemic, let me use the Waterbury line for an example. Here we are in a pandemic. I had to agree to shut the Waterbury line down so we could get a lot done while there was very few people using the system. We were able to complete the positive train control, but what did we find? Our number of people using the buses went way up because the buses were able to get them to the hospitals and the business opportunities along that corridor. So here we were in a pandemic having to increase service on one of our bus lines. So what we're learning right now here in New Haven is we've sat down, we have a true partnership going on, looking at how do we make New Haven Station like the Grand Central Partnership, where the decisions that are made by the city and the state, and we tie the private sector.
And that
in.
I'll just go really quickly over that. The thing
Sure.
that completely changed night and day after I've been covering it for 40 years is that, no, I'm not joking. State and the city always fought about who would run Union Station, how the decisions would be made. Now, overnight, new people came in, you signed this agreement, you're running it together, you're going to try to make it a multi-purpose station where there's retail as well as just travel stuff, and they're going to make more use of the station, and you're going to have it connected to buses somehow and mass transit. So that's the short answer. We've written a lot about that, but now you're telling me
Beyond that,
specifically how that'll work with. How's that going to work with rapid mass transit? We can have like a bus station there.
We're actually working on the plans for which streets we can turn into one way, so we can keep a constant flow of the traffic to be able to go and integrate in there. We're looking at how the buses come in. And, I don't know, I know you said you've used our buses. Have you been to the Green to go and see the new systems that's giving out information on when the next buses are coming in?
It's funny, I pick up the bus at the Green, but I don't think I noticed that. Is it at the station where you buy the ticket?
If you take a look and you're out on the Green, because what we're also looking at right now, we are in the process of getting out the fact that we're going to go for the new bus shelters that will have solar capacity, so we can actually have the solar providing not only the lighting that will go on within them, okay, it'll also provide the power for the information to be able to exchange on when the next bus is
on next bus. That's very nice. And is that just on the Green, or is that also?
Oh no, that'll be throughout the state. We'll start with the densest areas and where the most people are
That's
utilizing.
a great thing.
Yes, all this is, and wasn't even conceived of.
But what I
years
didn't
ago.
understand is you were starting to talk and I interrupted and got you off the subject.
No, I can't imagine you did that. Did you
not
really
on
do
purpose.
that?
But on rapid transit, in terms of what you're planning, in terms of housing patterns in the cities, that's something New Haven's going to see. I didn't understand what that was.
Well, what it is that right now, Sela, who is the commissioner on housing.
New Haven, another New Haven or Mascara. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's for the state. But anyways, yes, she spends a lot of time here. And what we've done is we sit down now, and as we're talking about where the investments are going to go, when she's going to be investing in housing projects and stuff, we're doing it in a way that it ties in. How do you tie that area and that development so that it has access to mass transportation to get you to train stations, to major sources of employment, to hospitals? In other words, to do it intelligently, so that way we know that you won't, you always hear, oh, nobody's riding the buses. Well, get out there and ride them.
No,
and then
people
tell
are
me
on the
that.
buses, and it's interesting what you say that because patterns change so much. And the
Which-
big thing here is the Milford Post Mall, the Connecticut Post Mall, because a lot of people, the way the bus lines used to be, people weren't needing to go there for their jobs. And now it can be, especially on off hours, very difficult to connect on the buses for that.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying to you, even when we're looking at how we work that station, when I sat down with the mayor's team and everything else, we have a common goal there, which is to make that station a success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you tie in the private sector. I mean, I've heard every idea from boutique hotels to when we're putting up the garages, whether or not we can use the base floor of the garages for retail. All that helps offset the operating costs, which if you don't have any other way of doing it, you're passing it on to the people that are having to buy tickets.
And will that be where people will pick up the bus in the future to go to Milford Post Mall, or will it still be the green?
I can't
I'm getting
answer
in the
that
weeds
because
here. Yeah.
what you're getting into is exactly what we have to do. That's why you do studies and you do all this modeling studies and you bring in the experts that know where the travel patterns are going. And the beauty today is you don't have to guess at that anymore because you get data from the federal government that shows you the cell phone patterns of where everybody is going. I can know how many people are on any section of the highway at any time of the day, not the individual, but I get the data that shows the volume that's traveling. So even when I was the president of Metro North, I knew how many people that came into Grand Central, for example, went over to Penn Station, went down to Wall Street, went up north, or went over to the east side. And that's why we know right now what market is going to be developed when Amtrak puts those 4 stations in the Bronx. And that's why the businesses that are in Fairfield County were reaching out to the Bronx Borough president because they realize right now they can bring in a lot of potential employees that will be coming in the opposite direction, coming into Connecticut.
That's so interesting. So without going into privacy and whose cell phone is
Right.
going where, you're able to look at aggregate cell phone
Yes.
data to see where people are traveling so that you can make decisions where you put stuff. That's so interesting. And then and I guess you were talking about the pandemic. We're going to have to figure out what permanent changes occur in the pandemic and temporary. And I'm thinking of parking at Union Station because there's always been too little. People feel they have to go to West Haven. And now only half the spots something are being used. Do you think it's going to, when you do that planning, do you say people will be returning there en masse so it's like before? Or do you think it's going to be somewhere in the middle?
Well, again, what we do know is that Amtrak wants to develop New Haven a lot more. Okay, it's going to be a major hub for them, which means that they're going to need parking on the top of the fact that we need parking that's there. So will things change as there's more and more mass transit that actually functions to bring people to the station? That may keep some of the numbers down, but we do know that it's returning, and you can see it right now. I've been in the garage. I've been, when I've had to go down to New York, I've come in here, and that garage has been pretty well empty. That's not the case anymore. Right now, you go over to that garage. If you're going in there early in the morning, you're going up several levels to go and find a parking spot.
So we're back to that. I was kind of glad for a while because I live here and I get to go to the
Yeah,
station.
well, that's I had the same thing. People were
Progress
happy
has
when
to go on.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
it's been nice to take a ride on the highway. And you can shoot down, and there's no red zones when you open up your Waze or your maps. And now all of a sudden it's back to the red zones, and I'm the one that's saying, "Thank God." Okay,
Yeah.
it's a sign that
We're coming back.
Yeah.
Before I get you off trains, that question everyone always asks
Yeah.
is when I came to New Haven in 78, it was an hour and a half, hour, 20 minutes to get to New York. Now it's over 2 hours. A few politicians sometimes say we're going to get it down to an hour, which does not seem realistic because, as you say, we didn't rebuild all our tracks and everything after World War II the way some other countries did, so we can't physically get the trains moving that fast, but we can make it go faster. What's the prognosis? What does it take now, and how much are we going to cut it?
Okay, what I've committed to, the governor has never backed off of the fact that he wants faster trains going down. Where we are right now is we're exploring a number of things. One, what we can do with adding capacity by having access into Penn Station. A lot of what drove...
And you're talking for Metro North now, because right now Metro North only goes to Grand Central. You're saying if we go to Penn Station, that gives us more alternatives.
Yeah, definitely does. Okay, and that was the original deal. We gave up part of our lower level at Grand Central, okay, so that the Long Island could come in under Grand Central Station, and in exchange, we were to get access into Penn Station. That was the deal that was done years ago when I first was working over at the MTA. So where we're at right now, when you start talking about what's going to happen in terms of the speeds, part of what went on because of the FRA coming in after a number of
Federal
accidents.
Rail Administration.
Federal Railroad Administration. Thank you. Remind me whenever I throw out
No
an
problem. That's my job. I got a job too. You got to run a big agency. I got to do acronyms for our readers and listeners. Yeah.
So the Federal Railroad Administration put some restrictions on based on the fact that it used to be that we relied totally on the engineer and the conductor to make sure that all speed restrictions were adhered to. Now, very similar to the same things that you're seeing coming out in cars, all right? The rail systems with the positive train control is actually going to be controlling the speeds that everybody goes at. All right, so if you have a restriction that drops it down to 30 miles an hour, if the engineer happened to not be recalling that that speed restriction was on for the day, the system is going to slow that train down regardless of what went on. Now, talk about it from the standpoint of what that means in terms of change. Before this system went in, the FRA, in order to make sure that restrictions were being adhered to, forced a change in terms of the speeds that trains were operating that added about 10 minutes onto the schedule. The other end that I always talk to people about is when I came back in 2014 after all the accidents, they asked me to come back to Metro North. I was shocked to find that we had one area where we were operating at 95 miles an hour that had been dropped down to 80. And I'm like, why did we drop it down? And the main reason for dropping it down wasn't infrastructure. It was because with all the trains that had been added on, trying to get from a 4-track New Haven line to a 2-track Harlem line and a 2-track Hudson line, all onto 4 tracks going into Grand Central, the capacity to deal with those trains going in affected the input coming all the way from the other lines.
So there's a bottleneck at Grand Central for different lines.
You got it. So and add to that bottleneck that when infrastructure, and I'm going to say we in Connecticut, we're to blame as well. We had a catenary job that lasted over 30 years. And when they were doing that catenary job, it meant that you lost one track in a block or 2 blocks all the way through for the last 30 years. So we weren't even functioning at full capacity. And on top of that, with deferred maintenance going on, we had a lot of spots out there on the railroad that were slowdowns. So they made decisions then. Why would you keep maintaining? Because for every speed increment that you want to increase, there's more maintenance standards that you have to meet that costs money. So if you're not going to be able to run at 95 miles an hour, why maintain for 95 miles an hour? That psychology had to go out the window. We had to start talking about how do we get the maximum that we can get out of this line. We have a partnership with Metro North. You know, as you know, I was the president there, and I want to say that I had a fantastic relationship with the Transportation Committee here in Connecticut. Kathy Rinaldi is the president there now. Same thing. We have a fantastic relationship, and they now treat us, as their client, and they are doing the jobs that we're asking them to do.
Like getting rid of that bottleneck. So it sounds like first you're doing a whole category of reasons that we can deal causes for the slowdowns of the train that had to do with deferred maintenance, with jobs that are taking too long, with the technology that could change, so they don't have to slow
going
down.
On. Okay.
So that some of that's changing, and that's helping. So bottom line is, what does it take now to get to Grand Central? What is the change going to be?
You have not seen the change yet. You're going to start seeing the changes in the next schedule changes that you'll see. We're going to start by first getting in some of the. If you remember, I don't know how long back you were commuting.
78, yeah.
Yeah, we used to have Zone Express trains that ran.
I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to get some of those back in as you look at
somewhere they might not stop at Green
stopping
Farms.
at every single station along the way, as opposed to like the Amtrak type of operation where it's New Haven, used to be Bridgeport, Stamford, Greenwich maybe, or New Rochelle, and then down into Penn Station. We need to get some of those back on so that we're targeting areas that we can get faster trains down. The other end that is an opportunity now is even prior to the pandemic, our commuting patterns were changing. People were starting to work 3-day 12-hour shifts, 4-day 10-hour shifts. So what was the normal rush hour, and that was nationwide, that wasn't just here, is changing. So we had to start seeing how that changing environment was affecting where it is that people need to get to. It's much easier to schedule a train at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning that's going to get down to Grand Central a lot quicker because there's less trains that are out there at that time right now. So it provides you an opportunity to look at new ways of doing it. So we're in the middle of right now testing out all of these theories, testing out, running test trains to go and see how fast we can go. And the other thing that we're looking at, which we never had the ability to look at before, is ideas like, can we tunnel under Bridgeport Curve, which is an S curve, slows all the trains down to 30 miles an hour. All right. I'm gonna attribute the transportation department at the DOT. Rich Andreski and his team came up with, if we could tunnel under for several miles.
And what is that in Bridgeport that you would tunnel under?
Right under our existing tracks, but turn around and straighten it straight out. Instead of being locked in to a system that the maximum you could ever achieve would be 125, which is what Amtrak was, what we were saying was going to be the maximum on the territory. We could possibly put in a tunnel that you could go 160 or 170 miles an hour.
So bottom line, how long does it take now to get to New York?
About 2 hours. Some of them are just making it under 2 hours, some of them a little bit over 2 hours.
And
so we want to get 10 minutes off within the next few years. Okay, a few minutes, you're going to start seeing a few minutes come off with the next schedule change. All right. The overall goal will be that I don't want to limit it because we have
No, give me minimum knowing it's not the limit.
I would say that the minimum you're going to see is 10 minutes coming off within the next 5 to 10 years. Minimum 10 minutes coming off.
And what's the goal?
The goal is to try and knock off about 25 minutes off of the ride going down there, and possibly more if we can look at ideas like where we can straighten out a curve, where we can tunnel under, and if we can go for when we buy our new equipment, buying equipment that's going to have the capacity to go better than 125. And with Amtrak, they want to be able to go 160 miles an hour through the territory.
And by that goal of 25 minutes or more is in how long?
Hard to say. I would say it's more. Let me just go to before I get caught up in saying something that everybody turns around.
Okay,
and says,
that will hold you to, right?
Yeah, you got it. Which happens all the time. Okay, and I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying to you, every time we turn around to go and talk about one of these things, the 10-year strategy to save the 25 minutes of travel time between New Haven and Grand Central. All
right, there, and you're listening to Joe Giulietti, guy who knows more about that than anybody else because he's the State Department of Transportation Commissioner. He's here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH New Haven, home for community radio. So, Joe Giulietti, you grew up in New Haven. What streets was it again you grew up in?
I actually grew up on the corner of what is now Ella Grasso Boulevard, Greenwich Avenue, and C Street.
Okay, so everything conjoins there. It's right near where the marshes are and everything. That's
well,
nice.
That's where the
and
marshes used to
are.
be. Okay,
yeah.
They're not there anymore. They're now all condos.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so when you grew up there, what was there?
Right across the street was where we used to play all the time. It was all salt marsh. Okay, you used to fish over there. The condos had not gone in yet. That was all just there had been.
So you used
some
to fish
landfill.
as a kid?
Oh yeah.
What'd you catch?
Snapper blues. Used to try and catch snapper blues and eels.
And did you
get a lot of
cook
eels.
them?
Huh?
Did you cook them?
I never liked the snapper blues, okay? It was more of the fun of going and catching them, okay? And we had neighbors that loved to have the eels, so we used to drop off the eels to...
What did they do with them?
Oliveras. They used to... They ate the eels. Oh, no, they ate the eels.
Okay.
Eels is good.
So you grew up in New Haven?
Yes.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school at Notre Dame.
Okay, I don't know why I was going to say Notre Dame, yeah.
Yeah, well... at the time, you had to take a test. I went to St. Peter's Grammar School, right there
in the hill.
Yeah. Yep. And if you took the test and you did well, you got the Latin program and you were accepted into Notre Dame. And
so yeah, how did you get to school? I'm asking you, as a transportation guy. Was it a public bus, a private bus?
Oh yeah, the public bus. I took the Connecticut bus. I used to walk from my house along the boulevard to go to Kimberly Avenue, and you would change buses on Campbell Ave, and that would shoot you over. The other way was I could walk to the other corner, and I could take the bus downtown and change to the buses.
So you went to the Green, but that's a little longer, but
it was a little
bit
longer, but yeah, and I didn't have to.
Did you like taking the city bus?
I love taking the bus.
I always did too. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, and actually, I got to know some bus drivers, and I actually enjoyed. They would ask you if you wanted to take a ride and ride the whole system, and I would ride the whole system, and sometimes the bus driver would buy you an ice cream cone for turning around and riding the system.
That's a great story because then you became the guy in charge of the system. But when you're growing up, I have a sense you didn't say, I'm going into transportation.
Oh, God, no. No, I had no idea back then. And as a matter of fact, I used to use the bus and, load my brothers and sisters, and we'd all go down. We'd take the bus, go downtown. There used to be a caramel corn place over by downtown, and they would give you all the unpopped kernels and you go and feed the pigeons on the green. Okay, that was one of the, and go up to go see the Peabody Museum. So all that was part of my growing
But you
up.
used to ride the system. You used to take the
All the
extra
time.
time to go. Now, what bus was it that took you to Campbell?
It was the one that went across Kimberly Avenue.
So what
where
letter was that?
Kimberly
I
and the
forget.
Boulevard. I don't know
They're
the numbers
now,
anymore.
but
No,
yeah.
No, come on. You do realize how long back we're talking about now.
I'm trying to remember last week, so let's just be honest here. So, Joe, you went to Notre Dame,
Yep.
then you went to Southern, right?
Yes.
And you studied history and English.
Yes.
So you weren't thinking, yeah, I like those bus rides. Now I want to reconfigure the system. You were thinking, what did you want to go into studying history?
I wanted to be a teacher. Okay.
Okay.
I was in the teaching program, and in 1970, it was either the second semester of the first year or in 1971, Southern Connecticut canceled the teaching program. They said there was a glut in the market, and therefore they changed.
Really, because it's big there now.
I know. Well, back then, my opportunity to go for a BS, Bachelor of Science, was changed to a liberal arts degree because they were not going to put out any more teachers in a market that could not sustain teachers.
That's so interesting. So what were you thinking then? You say, here I got on this.
How did I switch gears? The vice president of the United Transportation Union, his name is George Cahill, lived on the Hill. And back then, the union actually sent people to go get hired on the railroad. So between my freshman and sophomore year, and June 9th of 71, I turned around and got a job working as both a conductor and a ticket collector for both passenger and freight operations with Penn Central. And if you take a look, Amtrak started that same year. They started 1 month before I hired.
So as college, was this like a summer job?
This was a summer job that you could hold on to. They needed people to work the weekends, so you would retain your seniority by keep working on the weekends.
So you began working as a conductor and a ticket conductor.
1970.
Wow. Did you like it?
Loved it. And now you say to me, what happened when you had your teaching career canceled? So I'm over
Isn't
there.
it funny how decisions beyond your control change your life, but sometimes in a nice way?
Yeah, and I'll tell you one other nice story. At one point, they offered me to come back, and when I was working on the railroad, I was up at that time. I was up in Albany. I had the territory that went all the way to Buffalo down to New York City, and they offered me to come down and teach the engineer school. So I actually got to be a teacher during a period.
And
of
we
my
just jumped
railroad
ahead a
career.
little bit there. So you got an MBA, right?
I haven't got the MBA.
Oh, you did that now.
I got all the way to 43 credits, and I went down to Florida, and it's been very difficult to complete the program.
But you went so you finished Southern, but
Yep.
you remained in the job with the railroad.
Yes.
And have you been in transportation ever since?
Oh, yeah.
And you've had some pretty big jobs along the way.
Yes, I have.
Tell us just briefly some of the things you did.
Well, when you start as a conductor, I got an opportunity to go over as a locomotive engineer to Boston. And from Boston, I ended up running freight going across to Selkirk, which is up by Albany, New York. They offered me my first management job in 1979 as what they called back then a road foreman. From a road foreman, I was offered to go and teach the engineers school down in New Haven. From the engineer school, I got offered the assistant superintendent of the New Haven and the Harlem lines into New York City. From there, I ended up going down, and they wanted to try and take some people and develop them into learning other parts of the railroad, so I became the engineer of track for the Harlem and Hudson after going to an engineering institute. From being the engineer of track for the Harlem and Hudson, we were looking then at how do you treat a public agency like a private agency. So I was trained as a Rummler Brace facilitator.
Wait, can you go slower in that phrase?
Sure.
Rummler
Brace, which they wrote a series of books and had a program that you had to go through to get qualified to be able to do process re-engineering, which was basically like the old IE, independent engineering studies that you would do, that looked at what were the best ways to do practices. So we did a transformational to Metro North, treated it like you would treat a private company, found better ways to go and do work, found ways to start employing that instead of waiting for a signal to go out. If you knew the bulb had a 7,000-hour life, at 6,000 hours, you were changing out those bulbs, so we didn't get the delays on the system. From there, I ended up being offered an opportunity to go down to a new startup, which was Tri-Rail down in Florida. Within 3 months of being down there, they offered me the executive director to run the system down there, where I was running a system that was interlaid off of a freight line, trying to, the first commuter rail system in 25 years in the country. We made that a regional authority, and then I got called to, after all the accidents, both the FRA and Tom Prendergast as the chairman, gave me a call and said, "Would you please come up? We have a major issue going on in New York." And it was very difficult to get someone to come and walk into a system that had 75 Federal Railroad Administrator officers on the property, as well as 5 National Transportation Safety Board investigations going. So
you became president of Metro North 2014 to 2017.
right.
So you've been on the rails. Started out New Haven in the Hill, learned
Yep.
about the railroad there, went all around the country really, and then back to the Big Apple to learn about how to run trains from the tracks to the suite, really.
Yeah.
That's kind of what a
And
great...
I think I have most of the locomotives that I either qualified or qualified on. Their models, whichever ones they made models for, are sitting in my office right now.
So now you also co-founded a commuter rail coalition while you've
Wow,
been
you've
commissioner.
done your homework.
Tell me about that.
Well, what was happening there was a period of time, okay, that, you remember we were going through the whole thing with the positive train control and whether or not we had the money for it. The other issue that we had is that over time, it's been required to go and buy insurances for the railroads. And you can't buy insurance domestically above $50 million. That's the maximum that's sold here. And now we're getting requests to carry $1 billion worth of insurance, which is more than the operating budget. So one of the things we had to do as a commuter rail was we wanted to come together, form a coalition that would turn around and be able to go to Congress and talk about our needs. There's always needs for public transportation. There's needs for bus. There's need for highway. But we wanted to specifically target those needs that kept commuter rail going. Because in the time that I've been involved in this, I told you Tri-Rail was the first new startup in 25 years. Well, we now got another system over in Orlando. We've now got a system in Nashville. We've got a system up in Seattle. So over time, more and more systems, and as the country gets more and more.
So you're saying that
intensified.
can build, it sounds to me like you're thinking politically, that you can form a constituency that, because Florida's a growth area and it's not a blue state, but it's gotten more urbanized.
No, it wasn't Florida.
But there's
that we're
transit
talking
now.
about.
The Nashville has the transit now. You said Seattle.
Yes.
So was your idea that you get people who have a stake in train funding to get Congress to put more money into trains?
Exactly right. Yes, what we were doing was we took everybody, so whether or not it was the guy that was running the system in New York, the guy that's running the system in Philadelphia, in Boston, all of us, or the woman that's running, I shouldn't use guy because it's both men and women that are running these systems now, all of us were coming together to talk about our needs and our collective needs, which also, I used to be the chair for commuter rail, and I was the chair for high-speed rail at an organization called the American Public Transit Association. So through that organization, and now specifically targeting commuter rail, is why we formed the Commuter Rail Coalition, and we're able to now go and talk in Congress with all those people associated with transportation and appropriations to be able to say what the needs are.
And now you got a lot of money to spend. Joe Giulietti, Connecticut Department of Transportation Commissioner. And on top of it all, you're renaming our snowplows. Now tell me about that. Scoop Dog, Husky McSalty, which I thought was like Bodie McBoatface in England, Buzz Ice Clear, and Plowzilla. Those are the finalists for what you're going to name, or you're going to have 4 different plows named?
Those will be the 4 plows that are going to be named this year. So next year we'll be naming more plows.
But does that mean one goes in each area as a special kind of plow?
I think no. It's not that it's a special type of plow. What we came up with, it was fantastic. We had over 1,700 people go to respond to go and send names in, and you heard that the governor had sent in Harriet Beecher Snow, but
That's a good one.
it was. And the problem was, we followed the rules, and the governor didn't ask us to break the rules, and he sent it in too late, so he's got to wait till next year for his to go in. But yes, one of the things that I was dealing with when I came to the DOT is that there's a lot of people that automatically criticize and feel like, for example, there's a truck that follows the work that goes on, and people say there's a guy sits in the truck, he never gets out. That's a crash truck. I don't want to tell you how many times that truck has been hit and how many lives it saves, because instead of plowing into all the guys that are doing the work out there, they plow into the back of that crash truck. So, there's been, through this pandemic, one thing, the governor immediately came over to the DOT when he first got the job, and all the way through the first snowstorms, talking to people about the fact that our people are out there, rain and shine. They're the ones that fix the guardrails. They're the ones that fix the potholes. They're the ones that turn around and plow the roads. And it's so great to have that perception now of letting people know what it is that we do. And this was another way of getting some recognition, because some people had thought that, we changed the plows from orange to white, and it was just a lark. No, that was the people that were there found that we could save quite a bit of money by ordering it in white, because you can also then sell them when they're done, when they're in white. The other end of it is that the white worked very well with all the alert systems on the back that are in those bright flashing colors that were going on. So, and they found that by ordering the shells, we were able to build what we wanted specifically for ourselves, saving almost $15,000 a truck. And that's the type of stuff that goes on at a DOT. So when you talk about what went on with the naming, it was another great story from the standpoint that when we put it out there, yes, and it gives recognition to what's going on out there with the, and, I heard mentioning before, there's 169 towns here. We work with every one of those towns because not every one of them has an engineering department. Not every one of them has the ability to go and apply for the federal funds or to go and deal with some of the issues that are coming along. That's where we go to help with every town that's out there, and that's why I would like to say that we have great relationships with all the towns that are sitting out there.
State Commissioner Joe Giulietti, I don't want him. I'm going to have to let you go in a couple minutes. I just want to, before you leave, I want to talk green for a minute.
Sure.
How we're going to build out electric EV charging stations so that more people can have electric cars, especially if they don't cost $1 million soon. And the electric buses you're bringing in, 20 new electric buses over the next 18 months with plans to fully electrify. You want to give me the quick take on that before I let you go?
Sure. And, one, it's a great story to go and tell. Okay. The first one came in, we got a notification from our congressional delegation and from Federal Transit Administration that they gave us the money to go and get 10 buses up there in Waterbury. And
electric buses.
Electric buses. Okay.
And that helps cut down on carbon emissions.
Completely. And the technology has gotten so good that they can actually put them out there and they can operate, and you can set up your recharging cycles so that the bus can continue its routes. Eventually, we'll look at there's everything from passive charging, where at some of the bus stops you may be able to do passive charging in the future. So now add to that we then got additional money coming in down towards New Haven. We've got another money to come in to go and get other electric buses. We feel to go and change out our entire fleet, because you also have to, where you've invested in buses and put federal money to it, because we get most of the money for the buses from the federal government. There's a life cycle for them, and you've got to complete that life cycle. But within 10 years, we will have the entire fleet changed over to electric. I already told you about
800 buses?
Yep. I already told you that we're going to turn around and putting in solar bus stops in the future. We've already seen the technology on it, several manufacturers. I don't know if you're aware of it, but the solar charging stations, there's a company in Enfield that is making them and sending them all over the country.
Is that for cars or buses?
That's for cars, okay, but it's the same type of technology. And in terms of those solar charging stations, or those charging stations, we are now looking at, we have the ability to put them in on 95, 91, and 84. Right now, the federal government allows that. The new thing says that what we have to do is you can put them in areas where they're within a mile of an exit ramp, and the federal government is going to give us money to go and allow that going forward. So it's a tremendous opportunity, and they now not only have the ability to put those in, they actually have the ability in neighborhoods that they can tap into existing light fixtures, the street lights, and drop down a charging.
How fun. So next time we have you back, we're going to talk about all the things that have changed with technology.
Yes, and the fact that now that'll be available in neighborhoods. So it's not just on our highways and everything else. This is going to be a game changer towards the future.
All right, we're going to talk more about that next time you come. But
You're going to get rid of me now. Okay, I gotcha.
It's probably not a bad idea when money's falling for the sky for the first time in half century for how to improve the trains and the roads and the buses, to have someone who's spent the last 50 years figuring out how to run trains and buses. So, Joe Giulietti, it was a real pleasure to chat with you today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Sorry you didn't get a chance to drink your tea. I was firing so many questions at you.
I actually finished
it. Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, see, I didn't even see that. You man of many accounts. Joe Giulietti, Commissioner, Department of Transportation, thanks for joining us in Dateline, New Haven. Thanks to Harry Droz doing a miracle remote job producing this show. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long. at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.